Hey guys, tonight we're going on a journey back to a time when love was patient, love was kind, and also chaperoned, church approved, and probably involved a lot of sweaty handkerchiefs. Welcome to American courtship in the early 1900s, a time when asking someone on a date could mean navigating more rules than a Vatican poker night. So before we dive headfirst into this corset-clad, ice cream social-shaped fever dream, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of absurd historical insomnia content. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always 2 a.m., somewhere, especially in the land of forgotten courting rituals. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft white noise, snuggle into something cozy, and please keep your hands where I can see them, because we're about to enter a time when public hand-holding might actually land you in hot water with someone's grandmother. But let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what dating looked like before texting, Tinder, or even deodorant? Was it really all about calling cards and soda fountains? How did people flirt before emojis? How did anyone survive dating when you needed a chaperone just to split a malt shake? And what exactly was a parlor date? Why were parents always watching you like the FBI with a clipboard? Could you get rejected via telegram? And just how many layers of clothing had to be removed before one could even think about kissing? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1905. You're 21. Wearing 3 layers of wool, carrying a pocket watch, and you've just been invited to a church picnic where romantic tension is measured in buttoned gloves and lemon pie. Good luck. Your courtship journey begins with a small rectangle of heavy cardstock. You don't slide into DMs, you literally slide a calling card under someone's front door and hope her mother doesn't throw it into the fireplace. If she accepts it, you may proceed to step 2. Supervised sitting. The card is elegant, too elegant. It's been embossed, engraved, and possibly blessed. It smells faintly of aftershave and desperation. Your name is printed in an almost unreadable cursive that screams, "I own exactly one nice coat." There's no phone number, no photo, no quirky bio about loving dogs. Just a name, sometimes a middle initial, and maybe, if you're feeling reckless, the words at home Thursdays, 4 to 6. This is how romance begins, with typography and punctuality. You spend hours debating the font. Is Times New Roman too aggressive? Is cursive too soft? Will italics make you look emotionally unstable? You consult your sister, who hates you, and your barber, who offers confusing advice involving serifs and personal scent. Eventually, you choose something tasteful, understated, and likely to be crushed underfoot by an angry aunt. Then comes the moment of delivery. There's no send button, just your gloved hand trembling outside her home like you're about to perform minor mail fraud. You slide the card through the door or leave it delicately on a silver tray in the front hall if you're bold enough to knock and speak to the housekeeper. Every action is loaded with anxiety. Did you bend the corner? Was it placed upside down? Did her younger brother use it as a coaster for milk? Now you wait. For hours. For days. You check your waistcoat pocket obsessively to make sure you didn't accidentally deliver the one addressed to Miss Flora instead. You don't get red receipts. You get silence. If she accepts the card, and, crucially, if her mother accepts you, you may receive a reply. This could come in the form of a handwritten note, a verbal message delivered via a child in knickerbockers, or an invitation to call at a specific hour next Tuesday, which you must pretend is inconvenient even though it's the highlight of your month. Rejection is usually subtle. Your card might not be acknowledged, it might be returned, or it might simply vanish into the void, along with your hope and a portion of your self-worth. There is no closure. just emotional ambiguity and the lingering smell of lemon polish from her foyer. But if the reply is positive, then you enter the thrilling realm of sitting in a parlor while trying not to sweat. You show up freshly shaved, overdressed, and carrying a small gift, like flowers or a book of poetry you definitely haven't read. She enters the room with all the intensity of a royal procession. You both sit, upright, 2 feet apart. A chaperone is present, often knitting ominously in the corner. Conversation is expected, but not too much. Humor is discouraged, unless it's about marmalade. Eye contact should be brief, glancing, and ideally reviewed later with your therapist. Every detail matters. How you cross your legs, how often you cough, how much your hands shake while holding your teacup. This isn't a date. It's a highly ritualized anxiety performance, and if all goes well, you may be invited back for a second sitting, with more tea and slightly less room between your chairs. This is how it begins. Not with fireworks, not with flirting, with a font, and the soft, crushing sound of social judgment echoing from every embroidered doily in the room. Good luck. You don't hang out. You sit stiffly in her family's parlor, 3 feet apart, while her aunt embroiders aggressively in the corner like a silent moral referee. Every glance is a scandal. Every silence is too loud. Romance has never been so awkward. The parlor is a battlefield disguised as a room. The wallpaper is floral. The chairs are unforgiving. There's a lace doily under everything, including the clock, which ticks loudly enough to count down your dignity in real time. You've been here for 10 minutes, and you've already run out of neutral weather observations. She smiles politely. You smile politely. Her aunt coughs with the exact tone of "don't even think about it." You're allowed to speak, of course, but only within the confines of what her father considers respectable topics. That means no politics, no talk of money, and certainly nothing that could be mistaken for flirtation. The conversation must remain firmly on safe ground. Books neither of you have read, crops you don't grow, and what the pastor said in last week's sermon, which you only half heard while panicking over how high your socks were pulled. You're dressed like you're attending your own trial. Starched collar, polished shoes, hair parted so precisely it could be used to teach geometry. She's in her Sunday best, corseted into near-fainting territory, blinking slowly like she's trying not to lose circulation. There's no touching, of course, no sitting too close. Your chairs have been strategically placed by a mother who understands physics, body language, and teenage hormones. This is not a date, this is a moral audition. Tea is served, which is both a refreshment and a trap. You must hold the cup correctly. 2 fingers, 1 thumb, no pinky flailing. Stir gently, clockwise, never clink the spoon. Sip like a gentleman, not a horse discovering puddle water. If you spill a drop on your trousers, you will never marry. If you slurp, you will be remembered in this house for generations as the one who disgraced the Davenport upholstery. Her younger brother occasionally peeks in from the hallway like a gremlin. Her mother just happens to walk past every 7 minutes, rearranging imaginary objects on the mantel while scanning you like she's recalibrating a cannon. You begin to understand that in this household, intimacy is measured in how many sugar cubes you take and how confidently you place your teacup back on the saucer. The parlor, for all its doilies and antimacassars, is a pressure cooker. You are here to prove yourself not just as a potential suitor, but as someone who can sit upright without offending anyone. Are you industrious? Can you support a wife? Do you believe in God, roast beef, and stable employment? Can you survive small talk without bursting into flames? At some point, someone brings out a piano. You are either expected to play it poorly, publicly, and under soul-piercing scrutiny, or to listen as she performs a modest waltz while making no eye contact. You must praise her technique, but not too much. Compliment her hands, and you're a creep. Compliment her discipline, and you're a Protestant. There is no winning, only polite survival. Eventually, your time is up. Her father enters the room and clears his throat. It sounds like a cough, but feels like a gavel. You stand, thank everyone profusely, and back away like you're disarming a bear. You leave with your hat, your pride, and the lingering scent of boiled cabbage and lavender soap. If she enjoyed the visit, you may be invited back. If not, well, the embroidery needle moved a little too quickly when you mentioned you liked theatre. Welcome to romance in the early 1900s. It's tea, tension, and zero touching. And that's just round one. Everywhere you go, someone's watching. A chaperone is required for even the most innocent outings, picnics, strolls, or daringly wild tea parties. They are there to ensure your affections remain pure and that no elbows are touched without divine permission. Your courtship, in essence, is a team sport and not the fun kind. The moment you express interest in someone, you're no longer alone. You're now part of a heavily supervised trio that includes you, your intended, and an ever-present third wheel who knits, prays, and stares into your soul. The chaperone's job is simple. Eliminate any possibility of joy, privacy, or hormonal chaos. She is usually a relative, often a spinster aunt, a widowed grandmother, or occasionally a mother with the emotional subtlety of a freight train. She carries a purse large enough to house both judgment and emergency tissues. Her gaze? Unyielding. Her silence? Strategic. Her ability to materialize behind hedges? Terrifying. You go to the park. You sit on a bench. You talk about literature because that's all you're allowed to talk about. She sits behind you, pretending to read a devotional pamphlet, but her ear is tuned to your every syllable. You say something slightly clever. Your sweetheart giggles. The chaperone coughs. Not because she's sick, because boundaries. It's like being on a date while your high school vice principal sits 6 feet away, knitting a noose from moral fiber. Even simple things are tense. You drop your glove. He bends to retrieve it. A tender moment? No. The chaperone snaps her fan shut like a guillotine. Eye contact is fine. Eye lingering is not. If your shadows touch in a provocative manner, she adjusts her seat to block the sun. Sometimes they get creative. You're on a walk. She follows 10 paces behind, like a Victorian bodyguard with a grudge. You try to hold hands. She clears her throat in Morse code. You pick up the pace. She picks up the pace. You take a turn into the garden. She appears, already in the garden. If the chaperone is particularly zealous, you might be limited to group outings only. That means a casual hayride with 6 other people, 2 of whom are local clergy, and 1 of whom is allergic to romance. You smile, you nod, you sit 3 inches apart, separated by a burlap sack and the looming presence of judgment. The rules are exhaustive. You may not share food from the same plate. You may not walk alone under moonlight. You may not gaze at each other too long, too softly, or in any way that implies an imminent elopement. Flirting must be veiled behind metaphor and delivered in a tone that could also be used to order bread. You think you're clever. You lean in, whisper something sweet. She blushes. The chaperone makes a note. Yes, an actual note. Later, it will be read aloud to her bridge club. And if, heaven forbid, the chaperone is male. Now you've got her uncle, who carries a pocket watch, a cane, and unresolved anger from the Spanish-American War. He doesn't speak, he just stares. You're pretty sure he doesn't blink. Still, you try. You keep showing up. You endure the interruptions, the sighs, the icy glares over spectacles. Because behind the chaperone, behind the suffocating rules and heavy skirts of propriety, is someone you're genuinely fond of. Someone worth sitting 6 inches from for 2 hours just to hear them talk about wallpaper. Someone worth behaving for. Because if the chaperone doesn't like you, you will never, ever see her again. Not at the church picnic, not at the town dance, not even in line at the post office. Love in the 1900s is patient, it's kind, and it is absolutely never unsupervised. An acceptable group activity, the ice cream social is the hottest cold date of the season. You stand awkwardly in your best hat, trying not to sweat through your waistcoat while pretending you don't want to lick your cone suggestively. Spoiler, you can't. You've been preparing all day. Hair parted, shoes shined, pocket watch wound. Everything about you screams, I am a respectable young man who deserves a future filled with modest affection and butter churns. You've even practiced polite small talk in the mirror. I do enjoy strawberry. What a lovely hymn selection. And, no thank you, I don't dance. You're ready. The ice cream social, of course, is hosted by the local church, which means the Lord is technically also in attendance. There are paper lanterns strung up between oak trees, children shrieking in the distance, and at least 2 elderly women knitting in synchronized disapproval. You pay your 5 cents, receive your scoop, and then carefully wander into the field of emotional landmines that is small-town flirtation. She's here too, wearing a pastel dress that probably took 47 buttons to get into. She's surrounded by other girls, laughing softly, holding her spoon like it's a weaponized flower. You approach with the confidence of a man holding rapidly melting dairy in the summer sun. You bow slightly. She curtsies. Her chaperone materializes out of thin air like a Victorian ninja. You exchange pleasantries over ice cream. Vanilla is safe. Lemon is mysterious. Chocolate? Borderline indecent. You avoid eye contact while making intense statements like, it's slightly warmer than expected, and the bees are rather aggressive this year. Romance is blooming. Slowly, like a rose trapped in a snow globe. You suggest a walk around the table, while standing still. Her chaperone nods once, grudgingly, and takes 2 steps back, still within scolding distance. You talk about hymnals and gardening and whether or not peaches will be in season early. You are 22 and already 87. Suddenly, disaster. A drip of ice cream escapes your cone and lands on your cuff. You panic. She notices. You try to laugh, but it comes out as a wheeze. She offers you a handkerchief, embroidered, lemon-scented, probably sacred. You blot gently, wondering if this is the closest thing to intimacy you'll ever experience. Meanwhile, the local minister is watching you from under the lemonade tent like a hawk in suspenders. He knows. He knows you looked at her twice in the same minute. He writes something down. You'll hear about it during next Sunday's sermon. If you're lucky, there's music. A modest fiddle. A hesitant piano. You might be invited to dance, in daylight, with full supervision. At a safe and appropriate distance. Your hands barely touch. Your feet shuffle like you're auditioning to be a cautious ghost. You glance at her. She glances at you. The chaperone clears her throat. And just like that, the moment is over. By the end of the evening, you've had 2 scoops of melting courage and approximately 46 seconds of eye contact. You've recited the day's temperature 4 separate times. You've memorized her laugh, the curve of her parasol, and the exact way she said, "Oh my," when the neighbor boy dropped his cup. You walk home alone, your shoes sticky with spilled sugar, your heart strangely full. She didn't laugh when you mispronounced sarsaparilla. She let you borrow her handkerchief. You'll press it in a book later and tell no one. This is love. 1900 style. Cold, chaperoned, and delicately flavored, with sprinkles of anxiety and a cherry of absolutely no physical contact. You can't just ask someone to dance. You need a pencil, a schedule, and permission. Every dance is pre-booked like an 1890s calendar of longing. Your flirtation is now dependent on the foxtrot and your ability to avoid stepping on her hem. Before the music even starts, the pressure is on. Ladies arrive clutching dainty little booklets, dance cards, decorated with ribbon, gold trim, and a level of anxiety usually reserved for tax audits. Each card lists every dance of the evening, with tiny spaces beside them. Your job? Secure a slot. Carefully, politely, without appearing too eager or too indifferent. Failure to navigate this paper minefield properly means you'll be sipping lukewarm punch alone, while everyone else waltzes like hormonal swans. You queue up, nervously holding your glove and your dignity. You approach her with your best bow, the one you practiced in the mirror 5 times before leaving home. She smiles, opens her card, and you scan for the few remaining empty slots like a man searching for meaning in a soup label. The poker's gone. So is the schottisch. You manage to snag the second quadrille, which you don't actually know how to dance, but it's fine. You'll just follow her lead and pray you don't end up spinning into the dessert table. Once the cards are full, the dance begins. A live string ensemble is stationed in the corner, tuning their instruments like they're preparing for battle. The room smells like wax, sweat, and faint perfume. Every young man is dressed like a nervous waiter. Every young lady is dressed like an extra from a curtain-themed opera. It's hot, it's crowded, and nobody has eaten since noon, which is a problem considering half of you are wearing corsets. Your name is called. Your moment arrives. You approach, extend your arm, and she accepts. You walk together to the dance floor, 3 feet apart, as God intended. You bow. She curtsies. The music starts, and now you're dancing. Kind of. You're not so much dancing as participating in a formalized shuffle of cautious enthusiasm. The waltz requires elegance, posture, and absolute control over your limbs, none of which you possess at this precise moment. You're sweating. You're counting steps in your head like you're defusing a Victorian bomb. You gently guide her in a circle, trying not to make eye contact with her father across the room, who is watching like he's judging a livestock auction. The room spins. Her dress swishes. Your foot brushes the edge of her hem and time stops. She glances at you. You apologize. She smiles. The chaperone flinches. Somewhere, a piano string snaps. Each dance is about 3 minutes of pure, unfiltered social terror. Between numbers, you return her to her seat, bow again, and immediately question every life decision that led you here. If you're fortunate, you've booked a second dance with her, spaced out, of course, to avoid suspicion. 2 consecutive dances with the same partner? Scandalous. That's basically a proposal with rhythm. Occasionally, a gentleman might attempt to cut in, that is, request to take over mid-dance. It's considered bold, dangerous, and borderline barbaric unless you're a cousin or someone with a title. Most women will politely decline. Some might accept, depending on your performance during the poker. It's all politics. Very sweaty, embroidered politics. The night ends with the final waltz. It's soft, slow, bittersweet. You escort her back to her seat, bow one last time, and thank her for the honor. She nods, and just like that, the evening is over. No kisses. No hand-holding. Just aching feet, a damp cravat, and a dance card with your name scribbled once, in pencil, between a waltz and a cakewalk. You walk home alone, humming the tune, replaying the feel of her gloved hand in yours. It was perfect. It was terrifying, and you absolutely stepped on her hem. Feeling bold? You can put an ad in a paper. Yes, the original dating app involved ink, stamps, and the vague hope that the woman who wrote you back wasn't secretly a con artist or your cousin. It begins with desperation and a subscription to the right newspaper. You open the classifieds and scan the personal notices section, wedged between ads for hog feed and patent medicines that definitely contain cocaine. There it is. A column of hopeful weirdos just like you, each looking for companionship, understanding, and ideally, someone with working teeth. You decide to place an ad. It's thrilling and terrifying. You spend the better part of a day agonizing over every word. You only get a few lines, so you must be efficient. Single gentleman, 28, fair complexion, modest farm, fond of poetry, seeks respectable lady for correspondence and possible union. Must enjoy parsnips. You reread it 15 times. You delete modest and replace it with thriving, a harmless lie. Your cow is pregnant. That counts, right? You send it off with a money order and an urgent prayer. Then you wait. For days. Weeks. You begin to wonder if you'll ever hear back. Then one day, there it is. A letter from a Miss Eloise W. of Nebraska. She compliments your phrasing. She also enjoys parsnips. You're smitten. The correspondence begins. Unlike texting, this courtship is conducted at the blistering speed of the U.S. Postal Service in 1903. A simple flirtation takes months. You write each letter with trembling hands and a fountain pen that leaks existential dread. You include pressed flowers, careful calligraphy, and just enough personal detail to appear human but not unstable. Each letter is a landmine of social expectations. You can't be too forward. You can't be too vague. You can't mention ankles, consumption, or anything that might make you seem like a libertine. You ask about her favorite hymn. She tells you about her canning techniques. You swoon. After the third letter, you dare to send a photograph. It's a black and white portrait taken in a studio where you were told not to smile because smiling was considered suspicious. You look like a Victorian ghost with trust issues. Still, you hope it's enough. You brace yourself for rejection, but instead, you receive a photo of her. She looks exactly like someone who has spent 2 decades churning butter and being stared at by ministers. She's perfect, but there's always a risk. Sometimes the letters stop. No explanation. You wonder if she died, married someone else, or realized your handwriting resembled that of a drunken ferret. Or maybe she was your cousin. These things happen. You file the letters in a box, sigh deeply, and consider placing another ad. Some men take it a step further. They propose via mail. Full-blown engagements conducted entirely on paper. The bride agrees, packs her trunk, and boards a train to meet her future husband in a town with no plumbing and 7 cows per person. Occasionally, these stories end in true love. Occasionally, they end in mutual horror and a swift return ticket. And then there's the real gamble, the mail-order bride. A woman from back east, or sometimes overseas, agrees to marry a man she's never met, based solely on his penmanship and promises of a front porch and reliable crops. She arrives after days of travel, steps off the train in a bonnet and emotional shock, and sees him for the first time. He's shorter than advertised. She has more opinions than expected. They nod politely. They are now married. And somehow, against all odds, sometimes it works. Because in 1900s America, romance didn't need apps, swipes, or profile pictures. It just needed hope, postage, and a very flexible understanding of what tall, honest farmer actually meant. Physical intimacy? Slow your roll. You're allowed to walk together, but only on Sundays, and only at a pace that suggests you might both have gout. If your hands brush accidentally, expect scandal, marriage proposals, or both. The Sunday stroll is not about walking. It's about showing the town that you're respectable, that your intentions are pure, and that both of you can make it past the general store and back without committing emotional heresy. It's one of the only socially sanctioned opportunities for a young couple to appear in public together, but under strict, watchful eyes. Always the eyes. The entire town becomes your chaperone. You meet on the church steps, just after morning service. Everyone's still in their Sunday best. She's wearing a hat large enough to cast shade on 2 states, and you're sweating into your high collar like a guilty man on trial. The minister nods solemnly as you offer her your arm, which she declines, because touching would imply things, and those things are forbidden until at least week 7 of supervised courting. You begin your walk. Slowly. Painfully. Slowly. You are not allowed to rush this. The idea is to appear contemplative. 2 young people simply enjoying the Lord's creation and not at all imagining what each other's elbows might feel like. You stick to public roads. Side paths are frowned upon. If you even suggest the scenic route near the mill pond, you will be assumed to have dishonorable intentions. The rule is simple. If your great aunt wouldn't walk there, you shouldn't either. You smile at passers-by. She waves at a neighbor. A child throws a rock at a horse. You nod approvingly because this is courtship, and all things must be endured with grace. Every detail is loaded. Are you walking too close? Too far? Did you compliment her bonnet too earnestly? You're trying to be charming, but also vague. Too much enthusiasm, and she's ruined. Too little and you're cold. It's like dating while trying to pass a lie detector test in real time. She says she enjoys embroidery. You agree. You know nothing about embroidery. She mentions her father's corn yield. You pretend to be fascinated. At one point, she mentions how pleasant the lilacs look this season, and you almost suggest picking one. But stop yourself, because that implies gifts, and gifts mean deeper intentions, and deeper intentions require 3 sit-downs with both sets of parents and a notarized letter from your pastor. If you're lucky, the walk may include a modest bench in full public view. You may sit there, precisely 2 feet apart, and discuss the sermon or the color of the sky. Her gloved hand rests daintily on her lap. Yours trembles as you adjust your tie. You consider saying something poetic, like, "Your eyes remind me of bluebells," but panic halfway through, and instead say something about the price of flour. Eventually, the stroll ends. Her mother appears as if summoned by some silent alarm only visible to women over 50. She smiles, tight-lipped, and thanks you for the walk. You bow, of course. She curtsies, and that's it. No kiss, no hand-holding. Not even a direct compliment that can't be misinterpreted as appreciation for her good upbringing. And yet you feel lighter. You walked with her. You spoke. She laughed once. You didn't step in anything, and when you turned to leave, you're pretty sure you saw her glance back. Just for a moment, before vanishing into the family carriage like a well-dressed ghost. In 1900s America, this counts as a romantic breakthrough. The Sunday stroll, awkward, slow, silent, and somehow everything. She's wearing enough corsetry to qualify as structural architecture. You're trying to flirt while wondering how she's still upright. Every conversation is conducted through shallow breaths and the threat of fainting. She enters the room like a ship of state. Slow, poised, and carrying at least 40 pounds of strategically tied tension. Her waist has vanished. Her ribs are whispering for help. You rise to greet her, attempting not to stare at the engineering marvel that is her midsection. You bow. She curtsies, very carefully, lest her spine betray her. This is fashion with consequences. Corsets in the early 1900s are not just about aesthetics, they are social contracts made of whalebone and optimism, a sign that a woman is respectable, marriageable, and willing to risk internal organ displacement in the name of courtship. She has been laced in by her mother, or possibly a small construction team. The tighter the corset, the better the posture, and the higher the chance she might pass out during dessert. Your job? Pretend this is normal, that she doesn't look like she's being gently crushed by a decorative anaconda, that she isn't blinking slightly too slowly, that her smile isn't frozen in place because using her diaphragm might cause a wardrobe malfunction. You attempt conversation. Light, breezy topics. Weather. Music. Quilting. She nods politely, speaking in clipped syllables that suggest she's trying not to inhale more than 1 tablespoon of air at a time. You ask her opinion on poetry. She says Keats, and then immediately takes a sip of water, like she's just completed a sprint. You offer her a seat. She declines, not because she isn't tired, she's exhausted, but because sitting in a corset is less of a rest and more of a high-stakes negotiation with physics. If she bends too far, the boning digs in. If she slouches, it's scandalous. She's caught in a delicate dance between grace and respiratory failure. Still, you admire her poise. You marvel at the elegance with which she sips tea, balancing composure with a clear and present need for oxygen. Every movement is calculated, shoulders back, chin lifted, hands delicately folded. She is both ornamental and formidable, like a chandelier that could also win an argument. She laughs at something you say, or she tries to. It comes out more like a soft wheeze, which you interpret, flatteringly, as restrained delight. She places a hand gently on her sternum, a universal sign that says, "I am dying," but politely. You offer her a cookie. She takes one, nibbles once, and promptly wraps the rest in a napkin to hide the fact that chewing while corseted feels like trying to digest inside a suitcase. The mere act of eating is a calculated risk. Bloating, after all, is not compatible with an 18-inch waist and polite society. Meanwhile, you begin to feel self-conscious. You're standing here in a loose waistcoat, breathing freely, casually shifting your weight from foot to foot. She hasn't moved below the neck in 20 minutes. It's like dating a beautifully dressed statue that occasionally blinks. And yet there's an intimacy here. A shared understanding that everything, the posture, the restraint, the silent panic, is part of a performance. One that says, "I am worth courting. I can suffer with elegance." When the evening ends, she stands to leave. You help her with her wrap, cautiously, gently, like you're dressing a Ming vase that's been emotionally suppressed. She thanks you, steps into her carriage, and exhales for the first time in hours. You walk home in awe. Because if someone can flirt, charm, and stay conscious while being slowly crushed by historical fashion standards, that's real commitment. Her father owns a shotgun, a porch, and a very large Bible with your name suspiciously underlined in Revelation. You want to date her? Be prepared to quote scripture and maybe fix a fence post. This is not just courtship, this is divine vetting. Before you even make it through the front gate, you've been judged by her father, her pastor, and the general tone of your handwriting. But most intimidating of all is the family Bible, not a travel-sized version. This is the 10-pound, gold-edged, leather-bound tome that sits on a special table under a doily, like a holy landmine. It's not just for show. It holds genealogies, death notices, hair clippings, and possibly the coordinates of where her great-grandfather buried Confederate gold. More importantly, it holds expectations. If you're lucky, you're merely expected to swear your intentions by it. If you're unlucky, you're invited to read aloud from it, and not the fun parts. No psalms, no parables. You're going straight into obscure Leviticus territory. You knock on the door. Her father answers, already frowning. You're ushered inside. The parlor is silent, except for the slow, ominous thump as he places the family Bible in front of you. You glance at it. He gestures. You open to a random page and begin reading aloud, trying to make "thou shalt not" sound charming. He listens. Stoic. Hands folded. Shotgun visible but not mentioned. Her mother knits in the corner, her eyes darting between you and the margins of the holy text. You wonder if she's silently testing you on verse placement. You fumble a bit, mispronounce Nebuchadnezzar, and hear a soft, disappointed sigh. You finish the reading. Her father nods once. You are now permitted to sit next to her. Not close, of course, a healthy Bible's width between you, as is tradition. Conversation begins. You speak respectfully, pausing after each sentence in case the Lord, or her uncle, wishes to intervene. You compliment the family's rhubarb. You mention you've been attending services. You don't mention that you've only recently learned where the book of Numbers is located. Then comes the test. Her father casually asks, "What's your favorite verse?" It's a trap. If you say something romantic, Song of Solomon, for instance, you're a scoundrel. If you pick something too grim, like Revelation, you're a doomsday fanatic. You need something balanced, something safe, something that says, "I am humble, hard-working, and capable of building a chicken coop with spiritual overtones." You say, Proverbs 3:5. There's a pause. He nods. You have passed the first trial. Now comes the second. You're handed a rake. Apparently, the fence line is sagging. This is not optional. Quoting Corinthians proves you know virtue. Mending the property proves you're not useless. This is biblical courtship meets home improvement show, and you're in the spotlight. You rake, you sweat. She brings you lemonade and smiles faintly from the porch. It's the most romantic interaction you've had all week. By the end of the afternoon, your hands are blistered. Your soul is semi-approved, and you've made it through without swearing, falling, or revealing that you've never actually finished Genesis. Later, her father shakes your hand. It's firm, like a grip you might use to test the structural integrity of a barn. The Bible goes back to its place of honor, and for now, you are deemed acceptable. This is the 1900s version of meeting the parents. It's spiritual, it's physical, it's emotionally exhausting, and it's ongoing, because if you want to keep courting her, you better memorize a few more verses, build a new fence post, and hope to heaven that no one asks you to explain the book of Job. Welcome to holy flirtation. Just try not to sin or misquote. You can't just visit. There are designated calling hours, and if you show up unannounced, you're either scandalous or insane. Courtship is scheduled like a dentist appointment, minus the small talk and with more judgment. The calling hour is not flexible. It is not romantic. It is not spontaneous. It is, quite literally, an hour, maybe two if the family is feeling merciful, in which you, the hopeful suitor, are allowed to awkwardly sit in a formal room with the woman of your dreams, under the fluorescent intensity of her mother's gaze and a wall-mounted cuckoo clock that announces your dwindling romantic prospects every 15 minutes. You don't call in the morning. That's when the family does chores. You don't call in the afternoon. That's when her aunt naps and will absolutely complain if disturbed. The socially acceptable window is typically between 4 and 6 o'clock. After tea but before supper, also known as the romantic dead zone, where dreams are quietly crushed by overcooked biscuits and passive-aggressive knitting. First, you must ask permission, either in writing, through a note politely requesting to pay a call, or via awkward third-party messaging. My compliments to Miss Langley, and might I inquire as to when she receives visitors? If the answer is Thursdays between 5:30 and 6, that's not a suggestion. That's your new favorite time of the week. You arrive precisely on time. Not early? That's presumptuous. Not late? That's disrespectful. Exactly on the dot. Like a gentleman with emotional intentions, and a well-oiled pocket watch. You knock. The door opens. A servant greets you and says, "The family is in," which is code for, "You may enter, but remember you're being watched." You're escorted to the parlor. It smells like furniture polish and barely concealed disapproval. You sit on the edge of an uncomfortable chair while waiting to see whether she appears, and whether she looks delighted or mildly terrified. If she shows up in gloves, you may stay. If she shows up with her mother, you're being evaluated. If she doesn't show up at all, you are being ghosted in the most Victorian way possible. Once seated, conversation begins. Soft, careful, like a cat approaching a rocking chair. You discuss the weather, the sermon, local crops, and occasionally, if you're feeling daring, books. She smiles politely. You try not to sweat. Her little brother looms in the hallway, eating a pear and judging you. At exactly 15 minutes in, her mother reappears, as if pulled by a rope. She offers tea, or sometimes sits down with embroidery and emits the occasional meaningful cough. Your time is ticking. You attempt to seem intelligent, industrious, and emotionally stable while maintaining the posture of a man who might one day own a general store. If conversation stalls, you may try asking about her interests, but not too directly. Questions must be disguised as statements. "I hear you play the pianoforte," said in a tone that suggests you've never heard music but are very open to it. She nods. Her mother nods. Everyone nods. The clock ticks louder. After 45 minutes, the air shifts. You sense the end is near. Her father enters with a newspaper. The maid starts clearing phantom dishes. The message is clear. You have 5 minutes to wrap up this Victorian hostage negotiation. You thank them all. You stand. You bow slightly. She says it was pleasant. You nearly float out of the house, replaying every syllable and wondering if pleasant means return or never again. You make a note to write a thank you letter. You will rewrite it 4 times, and then you wait. For the next Thursday. For the next hour. For the next vague hint that maybe, just maybe, she liked you. Because in 1900s courtship, love isn't spontaneous. Love keeps a strict calendar. The local church is where you meet everyone, hear everyone's business, and silently stare at your crush across pews while pretending to care about Corinthians. Courtship and God go hand in hand, sometimes literally. Forget swiping, you scan the room the moment you walk in. There she is, third pew from the front, hat tilted just enough to reveal a curl of hair that's been painstakingly arranged since dawn. Her gloves are white, her posture divine, and her family is directly between you and eternal damnation. You adjust your tie, open your hymnal, and begin the most spiritually sanctioned form of thirst known to the 1900s. Devout admiration with minimal eye contact. Sunday service isn't just about worship, it's about reputation surveillance. Everyone's watching. Her mother, your grandmother, the pastor's wife, Mr. Jennings from the feed store, who once saw you loitering near the pickle barrel and now considers you morally unstable. If your eyes linger too long, there will be whispers. If you smile during Leviticus, there will be a meeting. But this is your best shot. Church is where everyone's dressed up, well-behaved, and surrounded by enough witnesses to prevent anything scandalous, and that's why it's perfect. You plan your wardrobe the night before. Clean boots, crisp collar, a subtle spritz of something that smells vaguely like pine and absolution. You arrive early and seat yourself diagonally across from her family, close enough to catch her glances, far enough to avoid casual conversation with her father, who once threatened a traveling salesman with a butter churn. The service begins. You sing, loud enough to be noticed, soft enough not to alarm the elderly. You nod thoughtfully during the sermon, even though you're mostly wondering if she noticed the new button on your vest. She coughs once, and your entire body tingles with the thrill of divine proximity. When it's time to bow your head in prayer, you sneak a look. She's already looking. You both look away. Heaven is real. After the service, you strategically loiter near the vestibule. This is courtship hour, unspoken but understood. Young couples stand a safe 2.5 feet apart, discussing hymns and weather, while chaperones hover nearby with the energy of TSA agents. You approach her. She curtsies. You say something absolutely riveting like, "That was quite a sermon," and she agrees. Even though neither of you can remember anything except the brief moment when your shoes almost touched, you offer to walk her home, or at least part of the way, under heavy surveillance. Her little sister tags along, holding a parasol and muttering threats. Her uncle walks 10 paces behind with a pocket Bible and a limp he doesn't talk about. You chat about morally neutral topics: daffodils, canned peaches, the pastor's chickens. Every step is a calculated act of virtue. Midweek, the church bulletin becomes your unofficial dating feed. Young man assisted Mrs. Carrow with her broken fence. That's you. Miss Langley played 2 hymns beautifully at Wednesday prayer meeting. That's her. These are social updates, coded in righteousness. If you're truly serious, you join a church committee. Nothing says long-term potential like stacking hymnals or sweeping the entryway with conviction. Bonus points if you teach Sunday school, repair pews, or demonstrate an interest in temperance, even if you have no idea what it actually means. Eventually, there may be a church picnic where you'll be allowed to sit nearby. Maybe even pass her a biscuit, or a church bake sale where she'll pretend not to care that you bought her pie, and you'll pretend you didn't plan your entire week around it. Because in 1900s America, the church isn't just a place of worship. It's your entire romantic universe, packed with divine tension, second-hand perfume, and the quiet, sacred thrill of falling in love, one hymn at a time. Nothing says we might marry one day like sipping from the same glass. Germ theory is new and terrifying, but so is how close your faces have to get. Sharing a lemonade is basically your era's equivalent of a kiss on the mouth. You're at a church picnic. Or maybe it's a 4th of July celebration. There are paper fans, fried chicken, and someone attempting to play banjo near a wasp nest. Everything smells like sun-warmed grass and mild perspiration. And there it is, a pitcher of lemonade. Tart, cold, tempting, the most scandalous drink in the county. You offer her a glass, polite, cautious, your hand trembling slightly like you're handing over state secrets. She accepts, she sips. You try not to stare at the exact spot her lips touched. This is now sacred ground. The cup is passed back. You hesitate. Every neuron in your brain is screaming about germs, but also romance. You drink, and just like that, you've committed an act of intimacy. To modernize, it's just hydration. But in 1900s America, it's practically engagement. There's no lip balm, no hand sanitizer, no bendy straws, just shared porcelain and unspoken affection. 2 sips from the same vessel? That's a social contract. You might as well start picking out names for the children. People notice. They always notice. Her friend whispers. Your aunt raises an eyebrow so sharp it could file wood. Across the field, her father lowers his fork. Slowly, silently. This is not a drill. You try to play it cool. Say something casual like, "Refreshing, isn't it?" But your voice cracks and she's blushing, and now neither of you knows where to look. She dabs the corner of her mouth with a lace-trimmed handkerchief, the 1900s version of a full-body wink. You dab your own face with your sleeve and regret everything. You offer her more lemonade. She declines, coyly, the glass trembling just slightly in her hand. This means something. You're not sure what, but it's definitely loaded with consequence. Maybe she's encouraging you, maybe she's terrified, maybe she just doesn't like lemons. Back then, there was no such thing as casual physical contact. No hugs unless someone had died. No kisses unless someone was about to be married. No sharing of cutlery unless you were legally obligated to file taxes together. So, sharing a drink? That was charged. Romantic. Maybe even reckless. Let's not forget, germ theory was still the new kid on the block. Some people believed diseases were spread by bad air, and others thought illness came from sin, dairy, or impure thoughts. And yet, despite all this, you sipped anyway. That's commitment. That's danger. That's the raw emotional equivalent of making out in public while holding a prayer book. If someone had a cold, you could both end up bedridden, separately of course. If someone had more than a cold, you might be inviting lifelong scandal, a courtship re-evaluation, or a mild exorcism. But still, you drank. She drank. The universe shifted a tiny bit. Later, as the sun sets and you walk her toward her family's buggy, she gives you the briefest glance. No words, no touch. But you know. You both know, because today, you shared something more than lemonade. You shared breath. You shared space. You shared a moment that neither of you will acknowledge in polite society, but both of you will replay for the next 6 months whenever someone mentions citrus. And that, in 1900s romance terms, is basically second base. Congratulations. Just try not to sneeze. You've got a quill, some fancy paper, and an overwhelming need to express longing through florid metaphors. One typo, and it's emotional doom. You send it off, hoping her mother doesn't open it first and correct your grammar. Writing a love letter in 1900s America is not a casual task. It's an event. You don't just jot a note between errands. You sit at your writing desk like a man preparing for emotional surgery. The tools are precise. Clean linen paper, real ink, blotting cloth, and enough nervous sweat to salt the Atlantic. You flex your fingers. You whisper a small prayer. Then you begin, "My dearest," and immediately cross it out for being too forward. Each word matters. This isn't a text you can send and delete. This is permanent. Ink on paper. A slow-motion confession in elaborate cursive. You want to be poetic, but not too poetic. Romantic, but not unhinged. You aim for a tone that says, "I am capable of love, land ownership, and gentle piano appreciation." You reach for metaphor, always metaphor. Her eyes are stars. Her voice is a brook. Her presence is like early spring, hopeful but slightly damp. You make it to paragraph 3 before realizing you've compared her to 4 different trees and a mild breeze. You panic. You crumple the page and start over. You attempt humor, a small joke about her embroidery, a light-hearted comment about the weather. But humor is dangerous. You fear she won't get it, or worse, that her mother will. Because let's be clear, this letter is not guaranteed to reach her eyes first. It may pass through 2 sisters, a vigilant father, and a very nosy housekeeper before landing on her dainty lap. If you misspell yearning, someone's going to notice. Still, you write. You mention her kindness, her wit. That time she laughed at your pun about pickled beets. You describe the thrill of seeing her at last Sunday's church picnic, standing near the lemonade with the grace of a minor angel. You close with something noble. Until we meet again, I remain your most faithful admirer, devoted and ever true. Then comes the signature. How do you sign? Yours truly feels cold, devotedly feels sweaty. You consider in Christ, but you're not writing a sermon. You settle on your full name, in careful script, hoping it lands somewhere between sincere and marriage material. Then the envelope, addressed by hand, sealed with wax if you're feeling theatrical. You check the postage twice, then it's off, into the void of the postal system, where romance must survive rain, mishandling, and the possibility that her little brother will draw a mustache on your name. And now you wait. Days pass, then more days. Then a reply arrives, and it's scented. Scented. You inhale the faint aroma of lavender and victory. Her handwriting is perfect, delicate, like it was trained by angels. She thanks you for your kind words. She liked the part about the trees. She hopes your Aunt Mildred's hip is recovering well. You read the letter 10 times. Then you lock it in a drawer with the sacred reverence of a holy relic. You show no one. You casually walk past her home 3 times the next week, pretending you're just interested in fence construction. This is courtship by paper. Each exchange is a dance. Slow, nerve-wracking, and completely at the mercy of weather and penmanship. There are no emojis, no spell check. Just ink, grammar, and a trembling heart. Because in 1900s America, love wasn't declared in whispers or glances. It was written, folded, stamped, and read again and again, under the watchful eyes of 2 parents, one maid, and possibly a reverend. You're engaged, but also, don't touch. There are rules now. You may court each other with slightly more proximity, but only under continued supervision, and absolutely no kissing until it's legal and witnessed. The proposal is done. There may have been tears. There may have been a poem. Most likely, it happened in a very upright sitting room with at least one chaperone knitting judgment in the corner. But now that you're official, your life doesn't get more romantic. It gets more regulated. You've moved up a level, yes, but that level has more rules than the last one. Step 1. Announce the engagement. Publicly. This often means a formal announcement in the local paper, written in a tone so dry it could double as a banister. Mr. Edwin Wallace and Miss Margaret Blythe are engaged to be wed in the spring. No further comments at this time. You haven't kissed. You haven't held hands. But your names are now linked forever. And everyone at church is already speculating about what kind of soup you'll serve at the wedding. Once engaged, you're still courting, but with a slightly more panicked sense of permanence. The clock has officially started ticking. There's a wedding to plan, dowries to assess, Aunt Mildred's travel schedule to consider. And through it all, you must behave like 2 people who are absolutely in love but allergic to physical contact. The rules are clear: no kissing, not even a quick peck. A forehead kiss could get you disinvited from the Methodist bake sale. The most you can hope for is a prolonged glance while no one is looking, or a fleeting brush of hands during a hymn that makes your toes curl with guilt. Every display of affection must pass through 4 layers of etiquette, 3 nosy relatives, and 1 visibly concerned parson. You're now permitted longer visits, but always supervised. Maybe instead of 30 minutes in the parlor, you get a whole hour. Possibly on the porch. Maybe you can walk together around the garden. But even then, you're followed. If not by a physical chaperone, then by the invisible weight of societal expectations and your grandmother's withering gaze from the upstairs window. The engagement ring, if you could afford one, is a symbol, not a passport. You don't get any special privileges besides a slight nod from her father and the possibility of using her first name in public. Maybe. If you've already demonstrated you're capable of maintaining eye contact for more than 10 seconds without spontaneously combusting from repressed feelings. You try to show affection through acts of service. You build her a hope chest. She embroiders your handkerchief. You write her poetry. She bakes you a lemon tart that says I am committed in crust form. Your romance is now defined by shared future plans and vague, trembling anticipation. Any emotional conflict must still be carried out in letters or in strained conversation during tea. You cannot argue in public. You cannot raise your voice. You must gently hint that you're concerned about her mother's influence on the flower arrangements, while still complimenting her lace cuffs. And finally, as the wedding nears, the supervision increases, not decreases. Because this is the most dangerous time, the time when people get bold, the time when one wrong glance could spark rumors and one midnight rendezvous could spark exile. No pressure, but you do it. You behave. You follow the rules. You hold on just a little longer, because after the wedding, after the ceremony, the cake, the rice, the crying, you will finally, at long last, be allowed to hold her hand, with both hands, in public, and maybe even with eye contact. Welcome to engagement. 1900s style, legal, binding, supervised. But hey, at least now you can say fiancé without anyone fainting. One poorly timed giggle, one unsupervised stroll, and she's ruined. You, on the other hand, might just be encouraged to move west. Double standards are alive and judgmental. In 1900s America, scandal isn't just gossip, it's social obliteration in a petticoat. You don't flirt, you navigate. You don't court, you strategize. Because one wrong move, a smile that lingers too long, a hand placed half an inch too low on a dance, and suddenly she's the main character in a moral tragedy, and you're just that boy who used to live here. Reputation is everything. It is a fragile porcelain shield built out of hymn attendance, starch, and other people's opinions. Once cracked, it never quite goes back. For her, a scandal means she may never marry. Or at best, she'll marry late and to someone with very strong sideburns and no sense of humor. For you, it's more of a light inconvenience. At worst, you'll be asked to take a job 3 counties away and think about what you've done. Everyone is watching. Always. The town is a theater, and every person is both actor and critic. Her neighbors track how many times you call. Her pastor notices if you sit a little too close during the sermon. Her younger siblings are unpaid surveillance agents who report every glance to a parental tribunal. Even her cat seems to be silently judging your intentions. One walk down the wrong path and she's labeled fast. One laugh that sounds too familiar and she's loose. One unattended moment on the porch swing and suddenly the church ladies are praying for her soul in that very specific tone that means we hope she moves. Meanwhile, if you make a mistake, if you're caught alone with her in the kitchen, or holding her hand at the church picnic, or, heaven forbid, standing near her after dark, your punishment is slightly more forgiving. People shake their heads. Her father might threaten to take a walk with you, with a shovel. But ultimately, someone will mumble, boys will be boys, and suggest you go out west, find a plot of land, and grow some character alongside your turnips. It's not fair, but it's standard. For women, virtue is public currency. A good reputation is her only real form of social power. One that can be destroyed by rumor, implication, or a poorly timed sneeze in the presence of a bachelor. For men, a bad reputation is a footnote. For women, it's the whole chapter. That's why every interaction is coded, choreographed, and cautious. Why chaperones exist. Why letters are read aloud. Why lemonade is shared like it's a legally binding contract. The stakes are high. One whisper can mean the end of courtship, invitations, respectability, and worst of all, the town's sympathy head tilt, and sometimes even the appearance of impropriety is enough. Maybe her hat was crooked. Maybe someone saw you walking behind the barn and assumed the worst. Maybe she laughed at a joke she wasn't supposed to understand. Suddenly, there are meetings, concerned friends, delicate conversations about sending her to visit relatives for a while. You might never see her again, all because you smiled. So you learn the rules. You stay 2 feet apart. You don't visit outside calling hours. You keep your hat in your hands, your voice respectful, and your emotions under tight social corsetry, because one wrong move means the end of everything. For her, you'll probably just end up with a stern talking to and a new job in Oklahoma. Welcome to romance in the 1900s. It's sweet, it's slow, and it's always one giggle away from public disgrace. You can't say it out loud, but you can flutter your fan. There's an entire secret language involving parasols, gloves, and eyebrow movements. It's like Morse code for horny Victorians. You've never been more confused or more intrigued. Because here in the early 1900s, courtship isn't a conversation. It's a performance, a silent, maddening, gesture-laden ritual where a single misplaced twitch could accidentally declare undying love or permanent disinterest. It begins with the fan, not just for cooling one's delicate Victorian sweat, but for speaking without speaking. Open the fan wide and wave it quickly. She's annoyed. Slowly across the chest. Interest. Snap it shut and glare. You're either late or accidentally complimented her cousin again. The fan is a flirtation weapon, a defensive shield, and a highly specific emotional semaphore. You spot her across the garden party, parasol tilted just so, fan in hand. She makes brief eye contact and there, a quick flick across the chin. You panic. Is that I adore you or please leave my periphery forever? You don't remember. You meant to study the chart. You meant to memorize the 47 distinct meanings of fan positions, but your brain short-circuited somewhere around tapping against left ear equals maybe. Then comes the parasol, a dainty sun-blocking device with the communicative power of a semaphore tower. Resting it on the shoulder means we can talk. Spinning it slowly says, I'm amused. Spinning it quickly means run. She adjusts the angle of her parasol, and suddenly you're questioning your entire outfit. Was your cravat too bold? Did she see you trip over the lemonade bucket? You try to reply, not with words, of course, but with your hat. You hold it against your chest, then lower it slightly. Is this the equivalent of a wink? A nod? A mild proposal? Nobody knows. You smile cautiously. She adjusts her glove. You think she just told you she's available for marriage, or possibly that there's a bee near your face. Either way, you flinch. The real magic is in the glove gestures. Gloves on, proper and polite. 1 glove off, bold. 2 gloves off, scandalous. If she drops a glove in your direction, that's not clumsiness, that's Victorian Tinder. If you retrieve it and hand it back, flirting. If you kiss it, wedding bells. If you keep it, lawsuit. There's also the eyebrow game. Eyebrows do heavy lifting in a world where nothing can be said plainly. 1 raised brow means curiosity. Both raised, surprise, or indigestion. If she lowers one and tilts her head, she's either smitten or silently judging your haircut. You'll never know for sure. You just nod respectfully and try not to blink too much. The best part? This system isn't universally standardized. It varies by region, family, and whether the chaperone can see you, which means you might be courting her or just participating in an accidental mime battle. But this absurd, beautiful chaos is courtship. It's slow, silent, and so repressed that even eye contact feels like trespassing. It's intimacy by implication, romance by suggestion, love written in the air with satin fans and veiled glances. You don't speak of love, you gesture it. And when she smiles at you, softly, and lifts her fan just enough to partially hide her mouth, well, that's not just etiquette, that's a declaration, or she might be coughing. Either way, your heart skips a beat, and that's what matters. Because in 1900s America, flirting wasn't spoken. It was performed with fluttering lace, precise posture, and the quiet, thrilling hope that your fan was saying what your mouth never could. You finally get to go out for a meal with her mother, who orders the pie, critiques your manners, and keeps a ledger of every accidental knee bump under the table. Romance is alive and being audited. This is it. The long-awaited milestone. A proper meal outside the house. You've dressed your best. Freshly pressed trousers. A waistcoat that still smells faintly of starch and regret. And a tie that feels like a noose of optimism. You arrive early, as is required. And there they are. The girl of your dreams and the woman legally required to make sure you don't touch her elbow. Her mother smiles, but not warmly. It's the smile of a woman who has survived 5 daughters, 3 famines, and at least 1 incident involving unsanctioned dancing. She inspects you like you're an expired tin of soup. You nod. She doesn't. And so the evening begins. The table is round. There are no corners to hide in. You're seated directly across from your beloved. Which sounds romantic until you realize that her mother is seated between you like a moral firewall in a lace bonnet. She unfolds her napkin with military precision and begins her campaign. You try to make small talk. Something safe. The weather. Recent sermon. Grain prices. Her mother immediately challenges you with a theological question involving Deuteronomy and property boundaries. You respond with something about Proverbs. She sniffs. Your date smiles faintly, the universal signal for "I'm so sorry, but I cannot save you." The waiter arrives. Her mother orders first, roast beef, no seasoning, and 2 forks. You are not entirely sure why, but you accept this as a warning. Your beloved orders something delicate, like chicken with gravy. You order what you hope is not too expensive, not too cheap, and unlikely to cause chewing-related facial distortions. Her mother begins a monologue about the moral decay of other families, while slicing her beef with the determination of a courtroom judge. You nod, sip water, and try not to breathe too loudly. When her daughter speaks, it's brief, and always met with a correction or unsolicited advice about how young ladies should never laugh too freely. Halfway through the meal, you accidentally brush her ankle under the table. You panic. Her mother clears her throat with the force of a small earthquake. You apologize, out loud. Your date stares into her mashed potatoes and whispers a silent prayer for your soul. Then comes dessert. You think it's over. You think maybe you've earned a crumb of goodwill. Her mother announces she'll be ordering pie for all 3 of you to see how you handle pastry. She watches as you cut your slice. You are being scored on posture, chew time, and how frequently you glance at her daughter without permission. She asks about your family. You answer with great care. She asks about your finances. You attempt a modest, honest answer. She then asks how many cows you expect to own by 1910s. You say 3. She raises an eyebrow. She was hoping for 5. At the end of the evening, she offers no handshake, just a nod that could mean, "You may proceed or I shall haunt your grandchildren." Your beloved squeezes your hand for half a second while her mother is busy adjusting her gloves. It is the single most romantic moment of your entire life. You walk home dizzy, full of nerves and cold pie, replaying every sentence you said, every blink you blinked, and every time you coughed too close to the butter dish. Because in 1900s America, A dinner date isn't a date. It's a trial, a quiz, a live-action performance of "Can you be trusted with my daughter's reputation?" while consuming stew. And her mother? She's the judge, the jury, and the woman who holds the only copy of the marriage approval form, signed in pie crumbs, with a warning glance. Cars are new, fast, and morally dangerous. You take her for a ride and suddenly everyone assumes you've eloped, or at least seen each other's ankles. Nothing good happens in a Model T without a chaperone. It's the early 1900s, and the automobile is the latest terrifying innovation. It runs on gasoline, misfiring hope, and the idea that horses are simply too old-fashioned to be morally upright. To most respectable folks, cars are less about transportation and more about temptation on wheels, because once two unmarried people are alone inside a vehicle, that's not a date, that's a mobile scandal. You finally managed to borrow one. Or maybe you've spent the last year fixing up your uncle's second-hand Model T. It's loud, sputtering, and smells like scorched oil and misplaced ambition. But it's yours for the afternoon. And you have a destination, a picnic basket, and exactly 0 adult supervision. You pick her up in front of her house. Her mother is already frowning from the porch. Her father has moved slightly closer to his shotgun. Her younger brother stares at the tires like they're spinning sin itself. You tip your hat, open the passenger door with trembling hands, and help her in, careful not to touch anything but air. Once she's seated, the entire neighborhood is watching. You are no longer two young people out for an innocent ride. You are a threat to community values on wheels. You start the engine, it backfires, birds scatter, a horse panics in the distance. Your heart skips at least one beat. She laughs, softly behind a gloved hand. You are both exhilarated and absolutely doomed. The car rattles down the dusty lane, top down, hair catching the breeze in the least respectable way imaginable. She's beside you, close enough to touch, not that you would, because even looking like you're enjoying this too much is grounds for disinvitation from Sunday services. The scandal, of course, is the privacy. A moving vehicle is one of the only places where two people can be alone for more than 7 seconds without being immediately turned into a cautionary tale. There's no parlor wall, no embroidery aunt, no strategically coughing younger sister. It's just the two of you, the open road, and a high likelihood of emotional combustion. Conversation is impossible. The car is too loud. You shout over the engine. She nods and smiles, probably guessing every third word. This somehow makes everything feel even more romantic. The sound of the motor drowns out society's expectations for a minute. You glance at her. She's smiling, or possibly grimacing from the wind. Either way, it's perfect. You find a quiet spot by the lake. You sit on the blanket. You talk. You don't touch. The basket contains sandwiches, lemonade, and the unspoken fear that someone might appear from the bushes to demand an explanation. You keep exactly 18 inches between you. That's the law, probably. After an hour, you pack up. As you drive back into town, a horse-drawn carriage passes and gives you the look, a mix of concern, judgment, and I know what you're really doing. You return her to her doorstep precisely on time. Her mother is waiting, lips pursed. You thank her for the ride. She thanks you for the afternoon. Your hands never touch, but your souls? Briefly adjacent. Later, you'll hear the whispers. Did you hear they went for a drive? No chaperone? Well, you know what that means. Nothing happened, of course. Nothing ever does. But in 1900s America, the automobile isn't just a machine. It's a portal to chaos, a roaring, gasoline-scented threat to virtue. And the next time you suggest a date, her parents will insist it happens somewhere stationary, like the front porch, with chairs and consequences. You're invited to a group picnic. It's a test. You must be charming, helpful, and immune to Aunt Lydia's interrogation. If you pass, you may be allowed to sit next to her niece without public outcry. On paper, it sounds quaint. A sunny day, a checkered blanket, sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. But make no mistake, this is not a picnic. It's an exam, and you're the nervous candidate, armed only with a straw hat, questionable sideburns, and a vague understanding of local vegetables. The invitation arrives through polite channels, maybe a folded note from her mother, maybe a messenger who whispers Sunday. After service with the urgency of a coded warning, you prepare accordingly. Your outfit is freshly pressed. Your boots are clean. You've practiced discussing rhubarb without sounding overly forward. You arrive at the picnic with a pie. It's store-bought, but you plan to lie. I made it myself, you'll say, praying no one asks about the crust. You nod at the elders. You offer to carry baskets. You smile at children who immediately throw something sticky at your shoe. The real test is still ahead. You spot her. She's under a tree, parasol open, chatting with her cousin and pretending not to look for you. You approach slowly, passing Aunt Lydia on the way, the gatekeeper of all public morality and potato-based judgment. She eyes your pie. She eyes your shoes. You feel like you've already failed, but smile anyway. She waves you over. Her niece. The reason you're here. You sit carefully, not too close. Everything at this picnic must be done in the correct emotional key of interested but virginal. The seating arrangement is informal but loaded. If you're too far, you're cold. Too near, and someone faints into the coleslaw. The conversation begins. You discuss weather. You compliment the lemonade. You avoid politics, dancing, and anything French. She smiles. You relax. Then comes Aunt Lydia, armed with a spoon and emotional landmines. So, young man, she says, scooping potato salad in slow motion. What do you do exactly? You panic. You do many things. You fetch things. You read things. You sometimes fix fence posts. You offer a vague but humble answer, which is immediately met with a that contains more judgment than a 3-hour sermon. She moves on to deeper topics. Religion, income, the structure of your future home. You are eating cold chicken while describing your 5-year plan for hypothetical goats. Meanwhile, her niece is delicately sipping lemonade, pretending not to die of second-hand embarrassment. Then comes the game portion of the picnic. Rounders. Badminton. You're forced to play, in your good shoes, with a group of children and elderly women who take it far too seriously. You trip once. You apologize 17 times. Someone yells, "He's not very coordinated." And Aunt Lydia nods like this confirms everything she already suspected. You return to the blanket. She offers you a deviled egg. You accept. Your fingers touch for a moment. It's the most romantic thing that's happened all week, and it's witnessed by 5 aunts, a deacon, and 2 squirrels. You pretend it didn't happen, but it did, and now you're emotionally betrothed, at least according to the woman currently reapplying her church hat and narrowing her eyes in your direction. As the sun begins to set, baskets are repacked and pie crumbs brushed away. You offer to help carry the leftovers. You walk slowly beside her. She thanks you for coming. You say it was a lovely afternoon. You both lie beautifully. Later, you'll hear that he's decent enough, if a little clumsy. This is a glowing review, because in 1900s America, a picnic isn't about the food. It's about survival, of your manners, your intentions, and your ability to eat potato salad while being quietly interrogated about your reproductive suitability. You're expected to get married, but not to talk about politics, religion, money, or anything remotely interesting. Small talk is an Olympic sport. Your relationship is built on weather reports and the shared hatred of beets. You sit across from her in the parlor, your hands folded neatly, your back painfully straight, and your brain screaming for a topic that won't result in exile. You could talk about the economy, but that's considered crass. You could mention your views on the election, but you're not ready to die. You briefly consider discussing your dream of building a self-sufficient chicken empire, but even that feels emotionally explicit. So instead you say, "Bit of a breeze today." She smiles. You've nailed it. This is what 1900s courtship is built on. Mutually acceptable blandness. Not too bold. Not too personal. A conversational Goldilocks zone where everyone remains calm, no one gets offended, and love blooms under 17 layers of conversational gauze. You try to build rapport. You point out a tree you both like. You ask her if she enjoys quilts. She says yes. You're now officially emotionally entangled. This is foreplay by way of horticulture. Her eyes sparkle. Or possibly the gas lamp is flickering. Either way, it's electric. She asks if you like poetry. You say yes, even though you've only skimmed leaves of grass and once fell asleep during the charge of the Light Brigade. You mention a line from Longfellow. She nods with the solemnity of a woman considering your suitability as a father to future children who will never raise their voices indoors. Silence falls. You panic. You reach for your emergency topic. Root vegetables? I never did care for beets, you say. She blinks, pauses, then replies, "Nor I." A shared hatred. A bond is formed. You might as well propose. In a world where passion must be diluted with decorum, it's the small things that keep you afloat. You compliment her bonnet. She compliments your punctuality. You both pretend not to hear her mother rustling aggressively behind the curtain like a judgmental raccoon. You're not allowed to talk about money, too forward. Travel is too indulgent. Illness is too depressing. Anything French is suspicious. Dancing, depending on your denomination, might be the devil's business. So instead, you discuss porridge. You discuss local birds. You comment on the crispness of apples this year. She giggles once, and it echoes through your ribcage like a thunderclap. Her father coughs in the next room, and you both instantly revert to full emotional lockdown. Courtship is a balancing act. You must be interesting enough to suggest potential, but not so interesting that you imply you've lived. You must be expressive, but not expressive enough to stir suspicion in the chaperone's soul. You must be warm, but entirely flammable proof. You offer her a second cup of tea. She accepts. You say something daring like, "I hear the mill's getting a new wheel." Her eyes widen. This is almost gossip, but since it's about grain, it's still safe. By the end of the evening, you know her favorite flower, her general opinion on squirrels, and that she's not fond of loud noises. You do not know her middle name. You do not know her thoughts on mortality, but you know she tolerates your presence, and in 1900s courtship, that is the very definition of success. So you tip your hat. You bid her good night. She curtsies in a way that suggests mild amusement and no legal liability. You walk home under the stars, buzzing with adrenaline and beat-related compatibility. Because in this time period, love isn't spoken, it's implied, whispered between teacups, danced around with weather updates and restrained sighs. And sometimes, saying "I also hate beets" is the loudest declaration of affection a person can make. She can't say what she wants. You're supposed to intuit her needs via carefully placed compliments about hypothetical futures. Misread a metaphor and you're toast. Welcome to the most delicate part of 1900s courtship. Emotional charades, played with lace gloves and a rising sense of panic. She can't come right out and say she wants to get married, or go steady, or even hold your hand for more than 2 seconds. That would be forward. Improper. Possibly arrestable. Instead, she must deploy a careful series of coded comments, designed to gently nudge you toward the appropriate conclusion, without ever saying anything at all. This is a minefield. You, the poor, baffled suitor, must interpret phrases like "I've always thought spring weddings were lovely" or "Mrs. Jennings' fiancé has a very strong chin" as direct signals about your own performance and timeline. If she says, "I wonder what kind of home I'll live in someday," she is not asking a philosophical question. She is asking if you're planning on building a porch or just leading her on until the next county fair. You respond cautiously. "I like porches," you say. She smiles. This could mean he understands me, or he's hopeless. You're not sure. She changes the subject to curtains. You're lost again. The real skill is in listening for tone. She says, "It's funny how everyone seems to settle down by 22. On the surface, this is an observation. Beneath the surface, it's a countdown clock made of doilies and suppressed hope. You nod and mutter something non-committal about maturity. You have just failed the test. She hints at her favorite flower. You forget it. She mentions that she finds men with strong work ethics appealing. You start talking about your cousin's new fence. She goes quiet. Somewhere in the distance, an engagement opportunity dies. You see, a woman in this era cannot express desires outright. She cannot propose. She cannot directly ask if you're serious. Instead, she must master the art of subtle implication, a lifelong skill honed through church socials, tea parties, and watching other women suffer from being too obvious. Her hints get bolder. Isn't it strange how some people wait years to express their feelings? She says. You panic. You say something about emotional patience. She stares into her teacup like it holds all her wasted time. You try to catch up. You say, "I think spring weddings are lovely too," but now you've repeated her words like a parrot, and she suspects you're mocking her. You offer to build a porch. She asks if you'd build one for anyone. You say porches are nice in general, and now you're officially the worst conversational architect she's ever met. Still, she persists. Because dropping hints is the only legal romantic activity available. She must layer meaning beneath pleasantries, weave longing into small talk, and whisper commitment through discussions of wallpaper. If she's lucky, you'll understand. If she's not, she'll spend another 6 months pretending to be excited about beet season while you ramble on about fence posts. And you? You walk home, thinking you had a lovely time. You have no idea she just told you she's ready to be your wife, bear your children, and alphabetize your ledgers. You just thought she really liked lilacs. Because in 1900s America, love isn't declared. It's hinted, softly, subtly, and with the quiet desperation of someone who will absolutely cry if you miss the metaphor one more time. No moment is private. Every courtship has an audience of family members, neighbors, and elderly women with nothing better to do than monitor the distance between your knees. Love is surveillance. In 1900s America, romance is never alone. It is never quiet. It is never unobserved. You are not just falling in love. You are doing it under a microscope held by Aunt Myrtle, who once disowned a cousin for putting jam on his cornbread too suggestively. You want to speak freely, move naturally. Maybe let your hand linger on hers for a second too long. But you can't, because someone is always there, watching, listening, judging. sometimes silently knitting in the corner, sometimes loudly coincidentally walking past the porch for the 6th time in 20 minutes. If you're lucky, your chaperone is asleep. If you're unlucky, she's wide awake and trained in emotional reconnaissance. Her job is simple. Make sure you don't say anything too intimate, feel anything too deeply, or accidentally graze an ankle. It's not just the immediate family, it's the entire neighborhood. Miss Bradley across the street has binoculars and no shame. Mr. Hoover from the feed store will know what you said by morning. Even the postman has opinions about the way you hold your hat when you say goodbye. And word travels fast, like biblical plague fast. You might think you had a private moment walking her home after church, but by sunset, the entire town is debating whether walking her home means impending engagement or moral collapse. There is no neutral interpretation. It's one or the other. You cannot even write a letter without an audience. Her mother might open it. Her sister might read it out loud. Her aunt might correct your grammar in the margins before passing it along. You try to express affection, and it comes back with edits. Love notes become collaborative documents, co-authored by at least 3 blood relatives and a particularly judgmental cat. Let's talk about seating. If you're in the parlor, the seating arrangement has been engineered by a team of spiritual engineers to maintain maximum distance. The love seat is a lie. You will not be allowed on it. You sit on 2 separate chairs, separated by an end table, 2 hymnals, and someone's embroidery project. Every movement is visible. Every glance is logged. You shift forward, noted. You lean in to whisper. Someone drops a teacup. You laugh too loudly. A cousin appears from nowhere with a tray of judgmental scones. Even outdoor events are monitored. Picnics? Supervised. Walks? Supervised. Group ice cream socials? Supervised, photographed mentally, and reviewed over dinner by 3 generations of people who don't like the way you said butterscotch. Privacy is not an option. Even implied privacy is suspicious. That moment behind the garden hedge. Scandal. That whisper at the bake sale. Gossip column. That time you reached to help her up from a hay bale? Basically a proposal. The goal of this constant scrutiny, of course, is purity, respectability, the unbroken porcelain doll of a woman's reputation. But it's also about tradition, about making sure that no one, ever, feels too comfortable. Because if you're comfortable, you might relax. And if you relax, you might smile too wide. And if you smile too wide, well, there go the wedding invitations. So you learn to speak in code, to smile without implication, to time your compliments between chaperone glances. Love becomes a careful game of chess, except the queen is your girlfriend's aunt, and she's already 7 moves ahead of your deepest emotional intentions. Because in 1900s courtship, love is not a secret. It's a performance, attended by a full house. And the tickets are free, but the judgment? That's extra. You did it. You proposed. She said yes. Now begins the engagement period. A long stretch of planning, more chaperoned sitting, and asking permission to call her by her first name. First comes the overwhelming joy. You've declared your intentions, possibly while kneeling in a field of wildflowers or during an especially well-timed church picnic. Maybe there was a ring. Maybe there was just a trembling voice and a hopeful glance. Either way, she said yes. You're engaged. You're halfway to holy matrimony, and yet you feel no closer to touching her hand. Because in the early 1900s, engagement is not a golden ticket to affection. It's more like a very long administrative hallway filled with committees, etiquette, and emotionally dense wallpaper. You don't relax. You report for duty. As a man betrothed, expected to be both available and invisible, affectionate and aloof, financially prepared and emotionally restrained. Step 1. Announce it. Publicly, properly. The newspaper prints it like a legal notice. Miss Eleanor Blythe and Mr. Howard Grimsby are to be joined in holy matrimony come June. Tea and judgment to follow. Everyone reads it. Everyone now watches you even more closely. Formerly casual acquaintances begin referring to her as your intended, which is simultaneously flattering and terrifying. You are expected to maintain a glowing, model relationship with zero mistakes and zero scandals, all while still sitting on opposite ends of the couch. You now have permission to visit her more often, but under stricter supervision. The courtship parlor is upgraded to the engagement parlor, which looks identical except the doilies are more aggressive and there's an engagement pillow that you're not allowed to sit on. You get to speak a little more freely, but only about topics approved by her mother's list of acceptable conversation themes: weather, furniture, mild illnesses, and the Book of Psalms. You ask if you can call her by her first name. Her father grunts. Her mother flinches. She blushes. Eventually, someone nods. You whisper her name, like it's a sacred spell. You've never felt more romantic or more afraid. Planning begins. Not by you, of course, by every woman in her life, most of whom you've never met. You are consulted only on things like how many guests you can afford to feed and whether your aunt's snoring will ruin the service. You nod, you agree, you pretend to understand the difference between cream and ivory. You are now an accessory to a social event, not unlike a rented chair or a particularly pale cake. Your job is to remain steady, honorable, and fully committed to someone you still aren't allowed to kiss. You carry parcels. You send polite thank you notes. You help select hymnals. You rehearse being a husband by learning how to discuss linens without expressing an opinion. Meanwhile, the clock ticks. Engagements in this era aren't short, they're interminable. Sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year. Longer if someone's aunt is sick or if your cows aren't producing enough milk to justify a reception. The world assumes everything is going smoothly, and you maintain that illusion by smiling through every potluck, every social call, and every discussion of cake frosting while secretly counting the days until you can finally touch the small of her back without needing to file paperwork. Every now and then, you're allowed a moment of closeness, a shared walk, a hand offered to help her from the buggy, a silent glance across the parlor that screams, "I love you desperately, but also I think I'm getting a nosebleed from the stress." Because in 1900s America, a proposal isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of the longest waiting room of your life. And the only thing more terrifying than asking her to marry you is realizing you now have to plan it. Flowers wilt, chocolates melt, but a lock of her hair in a brooch? Eternal. Your love is symbolized by mildly creepy tokens and embroidered hankies soaked in nervous sweat. In the grand romantic theater of 1900s America, physical affection was taboo. Open flirtation was scandalous, and direct communication was frowned upon unless conducted via letter, Bible verse, or gloved nod. And so, love had to find other ways to express itself, namely, through a series of meticulously crafted, overly symbolic, and occasionally concerning physical gifts. Nothing says I yearn for you deeply and also possibly own a shadow box like giving someone a pressed flower and a snippet of your own hair. Let's begin with hair jewelry. Not a typo. A real category of keepsake in which human hair, often hers, occasionally yours, was carefully braided, curled, or woven into small tokens of affection. Lockets, rings, brooches, and even framed wall hangings bore these delicate follicles of sentiment, and it wasn't weird. It was romantic. A strand of hair signified memory, devotion, and a subtle but constant reminder that part of you now physically belonged to someone else. That's love and mild possession. Gifting hair was not done casually. You didn't just pluck it from your comb and hand it over like a receipt. It had to be requested, agreed upon, and then extracted with care, ideally during a deeply emotional moment, such as the end of a parlor visit or just before a train departure. You'd press the lock between pages of Psalms, wrap it in ribbon, and possibly cry a little while doing it. If she wore it near her heart, it meant you were winning. Then came the handkerchiefs, embroidered squares of social tension. Handkerchief gifting was a delicate ballet. If she gave you one, it wasn't just for sneezes. It was a stitched signal that you had made an impression, perhaps even a promise. And if you used it, you'd better treat it like it was spun from divine fabric and not, say, dab your forehead with it during a particularly intense badminton match. That was desecration. Handkerchiefs were often hand-sewn, monogrammed, and scented, subtly implying care, craftsmanship, and the fact that she'd spent 3 hours picking out thread while pretending not to think about your collarbone. In return, you might give her a small trinket, a ribbon, a pocket mirror, or a carefully whittled object of no particular function. Bonus points if you carved her initials into it while looking pensive under a tree. But these gifts were only appropriate if timed correctly. Too soon, and you seemed desperate. Too late, and you were cold. There was an unspoken schedule of exchange. The first gift? Modest. A bookmark, perhaps. By the fourth or fifth encounter, you might escalate to a pressed violet in a tin case. Only after mutual understanding and parental approval could the hair or hanky stage begin. And even then, caution. If her father found your embroidered yours in affection handkerchief tucked into the family Bible, you could find yourself cordially disinvited from existence. Some suitors attempted poetry as a gift, a noble idea with catastrophic execution. Unless you were already literate in Shakespearean subtext and flower symbolism, your sonnet about roses blooming in her gaze might be interpreted as either endearing or dangerously unwell. Better to stick to wood-carved spoons and hope for the best. By the end of a courtship, you'd likely have an entire drawer of memorabilia. Curls of hair wrapped in parchment, scented handkerchiefs folded with reverence, and enough dried flowers to stock a Victorian apothecary. You would never speak of these gifts out loud. You would simply nod when someone said, "Ah, I see she gave you the locket," and then stare into the middle distance like a man who had known true, non-verbal love. Because in 1900s romance, gifts weren't just tokens. They were emotional telegrams, woven, pressed, folded, and occasionally, just a little, haunted. Ending a courtship isn't private. It's public news. People take sides. Families feud. The church prays for your souls. And you? You start over by placing another calling card and praying her uncle doesn't answer the door. In modern life, a breakup is usually a quiet disaster between two people and maybe a group chat. In the early 1900s, a breakup is a community event. It's not just two hearts separating, it's two family ecosystems colliding, a social calendar unraveling, and several older women immediately sharpening their opinions like knives. Because courtship is public by design. Everyone has been monitoring the relationship like it's a church-funded reality show. They watched you walk together on Sundays. They saw you attend the ice cream social and share lemonade like you'd just signed a legal agreement. They witnessed your polite sitting, your careful glances, your stiff parlor conversations about hymnals and wheat yield. So, when it ends, it doesn't end quietly. It ends with whispers, and the whispers begin instantly. Your absence is noticed like a missing tooth in the town's smile. You're not at her porch. You're not at her family picnic. You're not strategically loitering near the church vestibule pretending to read the bulletin board like a man interested in committee work. Someone realizes. Someone tells someone, and within 24 hours, every person in town has a theory. It starts gentle. Oh, isn't he calling anymore? Then it escalates. I heard he said her pie was too sweet. Then it becomes full folklore. My cousin's friend saw him speaking to a girl from the next town near the mill pond. Suddenly, your breakup is being analyzed like scripture. People interpret facial expressions. They dissect handshakes. They reconstruct entire conversations based on how stiffly you nodded after last Sunday's sermon. Even the postman gets involved. He has delivered your letters. He has opinions. And now he is emotionally invested. Meanwhile, the breakup itself is absurdly formal. There's no dramatic yelling, no storming out. No, we need to talk. Because in 1900s, America, even heartbreak has to be polite. You don't break up. You withdraw your intentions. You cease calling. You find it best not to continue. You perform a quiet social retreat like you're backing away from a wild animal in church shoes. If you're the one ending it, you must do so with grace and minimal scandal. That means sending a letter. A carefully written letter. Preferably one that includes a respectful tone, vague language, and no mention of the actual reason. Even if the reason was that her uncle asked you to recite Leviticus and then called you soft, the letter will likely be read by her mother first, possibly out loud, possibly with commentary. Then it's shown to her aunt, then to her father. Then it becomes a family artifact, a piece of emotional evidence. By the time she sees it, it will have fingerprints, judgment, and at least one underlined sentence. If she ends it, you'll learn in a similarly humiliating way. You'll show up during calling hours, dressed nicely, ready to discuss apples or hymnals, only to be met at the door with a polite smile and a phrase like, "Miss Langley is not receiving visitors at this time," which is Victorian for, "You are dead to us." And because your relationship was never private, the consequences are immediate. Her friends stop smiling at you. Her family looks through you like your wallpaper. The church ladies begin praying for her deliverance in a tone that suggests you were a spiritual threat. If she's particularly heartbroken, she may be sent to visit relatives, which is basically the 1900s version of deleting your profile and moving to another state emotionally. And you? You're expected to recover quickly and quietly. You are a man. You are allowed sadness, but only the kind that looks like standing silently near a fence post. You do not publicly mourn. You simply become a little distant for a few weeks and then begin the slow humiliation of trying again, which means another calling card, another rectangle of hope, another porch, another father, another aunt, another set of eyes watching everything. Because breaking up in the 1900s isn't just emotional, it's logistical, it's social, it's spiritual, and the worst part, you can't even cry about it properly. Because someone would definitely write it down and mention it at Bible study. Before you so much as tip your hat to a young lady, you're expected to read approximately 400 pages of rules written by a man named Horace, who hasn't experienced joy since the Panic of 1873. These etiquette books explain everything. How to speak, how to bow, how to unironically use the word courting in a sentence. You study them like your romantic future depends on it. Because it does. One wrong fork at dinner, and suddenly you're unsuitable. You don't flirt. You recite approved conversational openings like, "The weather has been unseasonably mild." Scandalous. Let's be clear. These manuals aren't suggestions, they're social survival guides. The difference between happily ever after and dying alone with poorly folded napkins is whether you remembered that ladies must be greeted after you remove your gloves, but before you exhale too enthusiastically in their direction. They come with titles like The Art of Gentlemanly Deportment or Courtship, decency, and civilized conduct for the morally upright male. Their authors are always men with names like Horace, Percival, or Algernon. The kind of men who believe eye contact is only appropriate after marriage, and preferably in low lighting, and they cover everything. Not just how to bow, but when, how deep, and which vertebrae should move first. Not just how to speak, but how to enunciate words like perambulate and cabbage without inflaming passions. Not just how to flirt, but how to avoid it entirely unless you've first received written permission from her father and possibly God. You don't just arrive at her home, you present yourself. That's an actual chapter title. It includes precise details on posture, hat angle, and how many times you should clear your throat to announce your arrival. Twice, 3 times is presumptuous, once is lazy. The etiquette book explains that when seated in her presence, you may cross your legs only at the ankle, and only if your socks are dark and emotionally neutral. Loud socks? Immediate disqualification. Polka dots? You might as well confess to embezzling. Flattery is permitted in narrow, regulated doses. The phrase, "you look radiant," must be tempered with something modest, like in a chaste and respectful manner. Anything too warm risks scandal. Anything too cold, and you're labeled aloof. One compliment too many. And she'll be escorted away to a fainting couch by a swarm of protective cousins. Now consider the fork situation. You don't just eat, you dine. And dining is warfare disguised as civility. You must choose the correct utensil from a horrifying battlefield of silver. Fish knife, salad fork, oyster spoon, dessert fork. If you so much as reach for the dessert fork during soup, Aunt Beatrice will audibly gasp, and someone will drop a biscuit in shock. And then there's letter writing. There's an entire section on the epistolary art of courtly interest, which contains lines like, "Express admiration with sincerity, but avoid adjectives of excess. A lady is not a goddess. She is, at best, agreeably presentable." Every moment is a potential etiquette exam. You're constantly wondering, did I rise at the correct time when she entered the room? Did I overbow? Did I underbow? Did I offend someone by folding my napkin incorrectly? Or did I unknowingly propose by buttering the wrong side of the scone? It's exhausting, but it's also necessary. Because failure to comply with these unwritten but painfully written rules doesn't just embarrass you, it embarrasses your entire lineage. One etiquette misstep, and your family name is whispered with pity for 3 generations. So you study, you practice, you perform. Because in 1900s America, love is not a feeling, it's a carefully choreographed ritual, best followed with a footnote, a diagram, and a pen for making corrections. And if you want to win her heart, start by learning which spoon won't get you publicly shamed. She writes you a letter. It's on lavender stationery, smells like violets, and makes your heart race. You write back on plain parchment, your hands trembling because you just dipped your cuff in ink. The smell of her letter stays with you for days. It's your 1900s version of a Snapchat streak. Perfume and penmanship are her weapons. You respond with slightly smudged declarations of intent. You're both falling in love through aggressive, cursive, and second-hand lilac fumes, and neither of you has made eye contact yet. Welcome to the most intoxicating part of Edwardian romance, the epistolary arms race. In this era, feelings are dangerous when spoken, scandalous when displayed, but entirely legal when written in cursive on heavy cardstock. It all begins with her letter, folded with military precision, sealed with care, and perfumed like it's trying to seduce your sinuses into submission. The scent is never accidental. She has selected it deliberately. Something light but distinct. Violets? Suggests sensitivity. Rosewater? Passionate but proper. Jasmine? Proceed with caution. You hold the envelope to your nose, and inhale so deeply you nearly fall off your chair. The paper itself is embossed, possibly monogrammed, possibly too fancy for your inky peasant hands. Her penmanship is flawless, slanted just enough to suggest femininity without madness. She writes in long, looping phrases with capitalized nouns of great emotional importance. You are referred to not by name, but by social title, my esteemed friend, or Mr. W, because in the 1900s, a man's full name on paper is basically a striptease. She asks after your health, your mother, the condition of your fences. Hidden between the polite inquiries is a subtle suggestion. I found the change in weather quite romantic. That's code. That means she's thinking about you while watching the rain, which is essentially Edwardian second base. Now it's your turn. You clear the desk, uncap the inkwell, and destroy 3 sheets of paper trying to spell grateful without blotting. Your hands shake. You write slowly, deliberately, trying to impress with your knowledge of grammar and restraint. You cannot appear too eager, but you must also seem sincere. The result is a sentence like, I am, as ever, most humbled by your lavender thoughts. You have no idea what that means. But it sounds romantic. Probably. You attempt to flourish on the signature. It turns into a splotch. You debate starting over. You don't. Instead, you seal the letter, consider dabbing a bit of aftershave on the corner, then panic and decide that's far too forward. You mail it. You wait. You inhale every breeze for a hint of violets. This is how you fall in love in the 1900s. One perfumed envelope at a time. No texting, no emojis. Just stationary warfare between 2 people pretending not to be absolutely smitten. You collect her letters in a box. You read them at night. You memorize her handwriting the way a modern man memorizes Wi-Fi passwords. You begin to hear her voice in your head, which is impressive since you've spoken fewer than 30 actual words to her in person. The letters get bolder. She includes a pressed flower. You reply with a clumsy attempt at poetry that includes the phrase, your presence lingers in my soul like a well-behaved breeze. She does not reply for 3 weeks. You spiral emotionally and begin rewriting your will. Then, just when you've given up, another letter. This one smells like orange blossoms. You swoon, because in 1900s America, love isn't loud, it isn't fast, and it certainly isn't clear. It's written in ink, folded into envelopes, carried by hand, and perfumed with longing so strong it could knock over a modest ox. Love is stationary, and also scented. You sent a letter. It was sincere. It was romantic. It contained at least 3 metaphors about roses and the moon. Unfortunately, she never saw it. Her mother did. And now, you're sitting in the parlor while she dramatically reads it aloud, one eyebrow arched and every 3rd word emphasized like a sermon. You want the earth to swallow you whole. Instead, you sit there, sweating through your collar, as the phrase, my heart races at your every thought, echoes off the wallpaper. Next time, you're mailing it anonymously, or maybe never writing again. This is the nightmare scenario, the one you thought etiquette books exaggerated about. The cautionary tale whispered by older cousins and bitter bachelors. But here you are, a participant in your own public emotional disrobing, courtesy of a matriarch with a flair for dramatic pauses. You tried to be poetic, tender, maybe even a little bold. You spent hours crafting that letter, carefully balancing on the knife edge between passionate and polite. You invoked the moon. You hinted at eternal devotion. You may have even written your laugh dances across my soul like a spring breeze. It felt appropriate at 2 a.m. Now it sounds like something that should be punished by law. She found the letter first. Of course she did. Mothers in the 1900s are trained in romantic interception. They can hear the rustle of passionate paper from 3 rooms away. She opened it, because of course she did, and rather than burning it quietly or locking it in a drawer for future blackmail, she chose the parlor performance route. You're seated uncomfortably on a chair made entirely of judgment. Her daughter is pretending to knit, but has clearly dropped a stitch out of second-hand mortification. You're trying not to make eye contact with the floral wallpaper, which now feels complicit in your humiliation. Mother begins. She reads in a tone normally reserved for eulogies and public readings of scandalous wills. She adds inflection, sarcasm, and a few disappointed sighs. My dearest Eliza, each thought of you sends my spirit soaring. She pauses, looks at you, adjusts her spectacles like she's about to diagnose you with hysteria. You nod politely and begin spiritually ascending out of your own body. The worst part? She doesn't misquote you. She reads it word for word. Every single trembling metaphor you wrote, every overwrought adjective, comes back to haunt you like a ghost of romantic optimism past. You learn the true weight of your own words when they're recited out loud by a woman who once removed a suitor from her porch with a broom. She reaches the final line, "Forever yours," in ink and intention. Then she folds the paper with surgical precision, places it on the doily-covered table, and sips her tea. The room is silent, except for the sound of your dignity melting into the floorboards. You try to recover. You mumble something about sincerity. She offers you a dry cookie and a colder smile. Her daughter, who may or may not still like you, excuses herself to the kitchen with the urgency of someone fleeing a collapsing building. And you? You stay seated, unsure if you've just survived a social execution or a trial by fire. Either way, you now know one thing. Your romantic life has a third participant, and she owns the good china. From this moment on, every letter you write is filtered through a new lens. What would her mother think? You strip away anything with feelings. You eliminate adjectives. Eventually, you reduce your entire emotional life to phrases like, "The weather remains favorable. I remain, yours respectfully." Because in 1900s courtship, love is not just between two people. It's between you, her, and the lady with the reading glasses and the uncanny ability to make souls sound like a venereal disease. They've installed a telephone. It's terrifying. You pick up the receiver and shout hello into the void like you're summoning spirits. Then you hear her voice, static-filled, distant, and one polite misstep from a full-on family investigation. The call lasts maybe 3 minutes, costs a small fortune, and is monitored by a very bored operator named Doris. Every sentence must be short, formal, and completely devoid of passion. "Would you like to attend the choir festival?" you ask, breathing like you just ran a marathon. She says yes. You nearly faint. Ah, romance. Now with wires and fees. The early telephone was a marvel of modern invention and a complete emotional minefield. To use it meant conquering 2 things: your fear of sounding like a confused goat and your fear of Doris, the switchboard operator who knows everything. You don't just call your beloved, you call Doris first. Doris patches you through. Doris listens. Doris judges. She's heard it all. The nervous stutters. The accidental confessions. The time you tried to say picnic and accidentally said pickled. She once heard a man declare his feelings and immediately follow it up with, "Oh dear, I've spilled something down my leg." Doris remembers. Doris always remembers, so you're careful. You plan every word. You rehearse your opening line like it's a job interview. You hold the receiver like it might bite you. And when her voice finally crackles through, you say her name like a prayer wrapped in static. She answers politely. Always politely. No one giggles on the telephone. Giggles are for handwritten letters and parlor sofas. The telephone is for firm intentions and verbal restraint. The audio quality is awful. You're 40% sure she's speaking English. But you push through. You shout something like, "Would you like to attend the choir festival?" There's a pause. A burst of static. Then, "Yes, that would be lovely." Your heart leaps. You look around the room like you've just successfully defused a bomb. You want to say something charming. Instead you say, "Good, I shall obtain tickets." Another pause. You both wait. No one knows how to end the call. Saying goodbye too quickly is rude. Too slowly is suspicious. You opt for the classic, "Well then." She replies, "Yes, well." And then you both hang up. It's awkward. It's brief. It cost 18 cents and a piece of your soul. But it's done. You've just had a successful romantic phone call in the year 1907, and you deserve a nap. Your parents ask what the call was about. You say it was about music. They nod, but your father raises an eyebrow and mutters something about newfangled temptation devices. Your mother asks if she sounded respectable. You say yes, though you couldn't really hear half of it. It might have been a telegram machine on her end, for all you know. Later, she writes you a letter thanking you for the call. You respond in kind. Because as much as the telephone offers speed, it removes all the beautiful, maddening ambiguity of traditional courtship. There's no perfume, no penmanship, no folded corners or lipstick-kissed margins, just static formality and a woman named Doris sighing into her headset. Still, you'll do it again. Maybe next week. Maybe with better reception. You'll ask if she enjoyed the choir. You'll plan another proper event, one with baked goods and at least 2 chaperones. You'll speak in short, careful sentences and pray she doesn't think you sound like you've swallowed a teaspoon, because in 1900s America, the telephone is the future. But love? Love still travels at 10 words a minute, with a 3-second delay and a heavy sense of surveillance. And if you're lucky, Doris will keep your secret. You're leaving town, or she is. Either way, this is your moment. You meet at the station, both dressed like you're heading to a funeral hosted by seers. There's steam, tears, and her father standing 14 inches away. You are allowed to shake hands for exactly 3 seconds. You want to say, "I love you," but all you manage is, "Safe travels, Miss Langley." She smiles, boards the train, and is gone. You stare dramatically into the fog. A stranger hands you her forgotten handkerchief. You carry it like a relic. It still smells like lavender. The year is 1908, and emotional repression is still the reigning national pastime. But somehow, nothing reveals just how deep your feelings run, and just how little you're allowed to show them. Like a train station goodbye. It begins with the time slot. Goodbye rituals are scheduled precisely. None of this lingering at the platform nonsense. You have a 12-minute window to show up. Pretend you're not emotionally imploding, and wish her well before she's whisked away to Cincinnati or some equally devastating locale. She arrives with her luggage, 2 parasols, a cousin, and at least one parent whose expression says, "I'll shoot you for impure thoughts," but politely. You doff your hat. She nods. Your heart is pounding like a telegraph key on a caffeine bender. You exchange small talk. That's all you're allowed. It looks like a fine day for travel. Indeed, the sky is most agreeable. Meanwhile, what you actually want to say is, "Don't go," or at least take my heart with you in a discreet velvet pouch. But you don't, because this is public, because this is proper, and because there's a Presbyterian grandmother on the bench nearby glaring at your ankles. The train bell clangs in the distance, a sound engineered by Satan himself to signal emotional despair. Steam begins to rise around the platform, swirling like ghostly disapproval. You shift awkwardly. She glances at the ground. Her gloved hands tremble. Or maybe it's just the wind. Or maybe it's both. You can't ask. Asking would be too intimate. Then it's time. She must board. You're allowed a handshake, not a hug. Not a lingering touch. Just a crisp, firm, 3-second clasp. Preferably with gloves on and no eye contact during the release. It's the romantic equivalent of signing for a package. You open your mouth. You want to say, "You mean everything to me." But her father's nostrils are flaring with Victorian suspicion. So instead you say, "Travel safely, Miss Langley." She nods, she boards. Her skirt disappears into the train car like a vanishing dream. You hear the conductors shout. The engine hisses. And suddenly she's gone. You remain still. Rooted to the platform. A man-shaped monument to emotional constipation. Steam wraps around you like judgmental fog. You stare into it because that's what men do now. They stare into steam and pretend they're not dying inside. Then it happens. A stranger taps you on the arm and hands you a small, folded square of embroidered linen, her handkerchief, the one she left behind. You take it. It smells like lavender and regret. You hold it like it's been blessed. You don't know what to do with it, keep it in your breast pocket, frame it, marry it. You leave the station walking slightly slower than usual, handkerchief in pocket, soul somewhere between grief and longing. Later, you'll reread her letters, sniffing the handkerchief like a broken man with a fabric-based addiction. You'll write your next reply more carefully. You'll underline "dearest" twice, because in 1900s America, love doesn't end with fireworks or tearful embraces. It ends with a muted farewell, a gloved handshake, and the lingering smell of lavender on a Tuesday morning. And honestly, that's the most romantic thing you're allowed to do all decade. So tonight, as you lie there in your gloriously soft bed, with central heating and no risk of your mother reading your DMs out loud to your ex, take a quiet moment to be grateful for the death of the Victorian courtship ritual. Because as absurd and adorable as it was, courtship in the 1900s was a full-contact sport, just with more gloves, fewer touchdowns, and a lot of parental oversight. Every step toward love required a chaperone, a carefully folded handkerchief, and nerves of absolute steel. You couldn't swipe right. You had to walk uphill both ways to deliver a note that said, "My compliments on your rhubarb preserves." And yet, somehow, people still fell in love. They still found connection, through parlor walls, through borrowed books, through 3 layers of wool and the disapproving glares of elderly relatives. They wrote letters. They waited weeks for replies. They stood next to each other in silence and called it progress, because love, awkward, slow, over-regulated love, always finds a way. So next time you send a text, or kiss someone goodnight without a chaperone clearing their throat behind you, maybe whisper a little thanks to the generation that walked so you could flirt without lace gloves and biblical judgment. Because history may be restrictive and bizarre, but it's also proof that people are endlessly stubborn, endlessly hopeful, and almost always willing to suffer through the weirdest rules for a shot at romance. Sleep well, and may your dreams be scandalously unchaperoned. Good night.